published author, and I'm also the moderator of this panel, which is the analysis of sex versus gender. And I'm going to let my co-panelists introduce themselves, and I'm also going to apologize for my frog voice. I'm kind of under the weather a bit. All right.
I'm Jill Seidentstein, and I am a local geek and writer.
Hi, I'm Winter Downs, and I'm too far from the mic. I'm a staff member at GeekGirlCon, and I write stuff.
Hi, I'm Janine A. Southard, and I am also a Seattle local writer and editor.
I'm trying to think of something different to say. Hi, my name is Fran Stewart, and I am a local geek and writer and technical editor.
Way to make it slightly different.
I know. I try to mix it up.
Awesome. All right, so this panel, I'm going to read the blurb really quick, just to make sure everybody's in the right spot. It's talking about the meaning of gender and gender identity in society and how it's always been a topic for speculative fiction, but now it's more topical than ever. Which books, movies, comics, and TV are handling LGBTQIA issues well and which are floundering? Could we one day live in a society free from gendered expectations? So we're going to be looking at the discussion and distinction between sex and gender, positive and negative examples of trans and non-binary characters, and where we can go as a society and as writers and readers from here. So before we talk about the topic, I guess, I would like someone on our panel to explain the difference between the two for the audience.
Cool. So let's go through a little history, I guess, because at one point sex and gender were basically used as synonymous. But then a lot of feminist thinkers started trying to distinguish between the two. Gender is your expression. It's the social role that is imposed on you. Sex is a biological thing. That's your innate, unchanging biology. But now, we're starting to realize that maybe biology isn't quite so innate and changing, and maybe it isn't actually so different from gender. So really, the question is, what are the differences between sex and gender, and what and does it really matter?
Good question.
Yep.
All right, so on that note, what were the first things that you guys came across that established or challenged your ideas in terms of what gender is? Maybe start with Fran.
Sure. In terms of establishing, I think the list is just too long to even go into. I mean, I was part of the Scooby-Doo generation, right? And you have very clearly established gender roles in that cartoon. But I remember at about age 11, I found in a video rental store in Arkansas, of all places, a videotape called Warriors of the Wind, which had this awesome picture on the front of all of these different characters doing all these awesome things. Turned out it was actually Naushka of the Valley of Wind, with the entire ecological sub-theme excised from the film by some crazy American asshole. But at the same time, my little sister and I, and at the time I was her older brother, watched this movie and watched Naushka and just went, I want to be her. Mm-hmm. And I think that was the first thing I can really remember where I was just like, her gender doesn't have any effect on who she is. She is who she is, and gender is a part of that. But she's just her at volume 11.
Mm-hmm. Janine?
Oh no, I didn't want to have to answer this question because I'm the weirdo on the panel who's like, I don't know, but I don't know. I don't really have a good story. I mean, obviously, as Fran was saying, there are clear gender roles in society, but there's also roles across cultures and across what you do. So, like typical American gender role, for instance, is women cook and men don't. My family on my mother's side are Italian immigrants. My grandfather cooks, and my grandmother did not. So that one went straight over my head. I was just telling Raven, I've been thinking about this as well. And like in middle school and high school, you can see the difference in, male, female, trying to figure it out. But I was a theater kid. The difference between theater kids and non-theater kids is way bigger than the difference between male and female teenagers. How close will you get to someone? What will you say? Will you just sit on their lap and start massaging their shoulders? Is that weird? Not to a theater kid. Totally normal. Ooh, can you do your makeup like this? No, honey, let me show you how to put a beard on. Like, it's normal. So I got nothing. I'm totally useless at this question.
That works.
No, that was actually an awesome answer, Janine, because I think it's really, it really elaborates how you don't actually necessarily get taught these things, and yet you know these things. Yeah. Like, you weren't oblivious to the fact of gender roles. You just were immersed in a subculture that didn't really care about them. So for me, my parents were total hippies. They gave me and my brother the same toys. So they weren't trying to instill those roles, but yet I knew about them. And I don't really know where that came from. It just came from the culture as a whole. But I can say the first thing that really challenged those gender roles and gender expression, it was more of an expression and performance thing, was music. For me, I was always a fan of those like gender blurring artists. Like Annie Lennox was the first one. Oh my God, I loved her so much. David Bowie. And then when I got into Britpop in the 90s, it would be like Suede and all the boys in eyeliner. I love the boys in eyeliner. Kind of wanted to be them.
Yeah, for me, the first thing that really challenged my notion of gender was Ursula Le Guin's Left Hand of Darkness. And I see a lot of heads nodding. I mean, it just blew my mind that there could be one being that could flip back and forth between genders. And not, I think this goes to Winter's point about where's the line between biology, sex, gender, like that they could father or mother a child. And this was all complete within a single organism. And I mean, it just, I'd be curious. I haven't read it in a long time. I'd be curious to see how well it stands up. So anyway, that was the first one for me.
Well, unlike these cool, awesome people, I grew up in the South in a very Southern Baptist household, and oftentimes Pentecostals. So my exposure to science fiction and fantasy and fandom in general didn't really happen until middle school, when I encountered someone whose parents were gay, and she was also gay, and I was like, whoa, that's a thing? Like, none of those kinds of things really had hit me yet, so my gender expectations were basically defined by the Bible and my upbringing, and I loved that got challenged, because it was like opening your eyes for the first time. It's a really weird experience to look at everything and go, wow, that was so wrong, and this is so awesome, and why are we cutting these people off and acting like they're not people because they are. You say like, why would it be a thing that we're even having this conversation? Why is it even necessary? It's called treat people like they're people, which is what Janine said earlier. We could kind of answer most of the questions with that today. And yeah, so it's kind of a duh at this point, but it wasn't always. And so that's kind of, I guess for me, where all of that happened. So thinking about that, we've been kind of touching on it a little bit anyway, talking about social interactions. They're very predetermined in our society. How close you stand to someone, how informal your speech is based on, the gender or whether you know them. There's all these different societal structures that define what we're doing. And so they can differ based on gender, and some would argue that these expectations are a form of gender policing, that, maybe they're not such a good thing. So I'd like to hear some of the panelists' thoughts on these coded gender interactions, pros and cons, and what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've just been thinking from your question about a lot of conversation I've been seeing online, particularly on Twitter, about how much women are expected, what is considered normal for women to speak in a room, like in a classroom. And I think, was it like 15% participation? People think that's half. Seriously, 15%. If girls or women are speaking 15% of the time, people think that's half. If girls or women are speaking half of the time, people think they're dominating the conversation. And this is because of how we're trained to perceive gender and how we're trained to behave. And also, I mean, I find it really interesting too, because Gina Davis has talked about representation of women in movies, and it's that same 15%. If 15% of a crowd is women or girls, people think it's half. So this number persists, and trying to raise awareness around that and get people to understand that women talking as much as men is not more than men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always think that'd be really easy in movies to just be like random extras that I have pulled in off the street. Let's get half of them female, half of them obviously male. Add some extra like gender fluid people in the middle. Let's get some nice representation here. Like, they don't talk. They mill around in the background. Why should they always be men?
Gina Davis actually said that in the script notes that when there's a thing about having a crowd, literally writing 50% of the characters should be women. But I like your addition of being gender fluid and trans and all the other variants.
Yeah, at least one fabulous guy in a tutu with a giant beard. Always.
That'd be a scene stealer.
That should be the new Will.
The wings would also be a scene stealer. I really feel like they would have to have a line, and that might be why we don't see that particular character in the back.
Yeah.
That should be the main character.
Yes.
I don't know that I can think of very many movies that have main characters like that at all, which is kind of telling on its own. So, you were mentioning biological gender as well, or biological sex and gender. See, it's so overlapping at times that even I go, wait, okay, back up. Nope. So thinking about the fact that we do this quick check at birth, and it's a boy, that kind of thing happens, and it is changing. Do you think we could ever get to the point where we do abolish assigned gender at birth, that it's not necessarily something that matters?
I sure hope so. But do you think we can get to the point? I'm really not sure. It's just so ingrained in people. And it's taken a very long time, and you can see the backlash against the very existence of trans and gender non-conforming people that, all you have to do is mention trans people, and then you find yourself... Yeah, well, then you find yourself in a situation of having to defend their existence and not be like... there's an example of, I was talking to someone who is, I consider a friend, and I mentioned a game that a trans woman made about her personal experience, and her immediate reaction was, well, you can't represent everybody. And I'm like, well, I just told you about someone representing themselves. Yeah. I wasn't actually asking anything of you.
Yeah. Since when did it become okay to not represent everybody?
Well, yeah, that was the thing I didn't even get into.
Yeah.
The problem I have with it, honestly, and this may be a little bit of a digression, but it's lazy writing. If you're always writing about straight white guys, you suck.
I feel briefly like I have to stand up for the writer who writes what she knows, because they've already heard me say this, you haven't. But basically all the characters in my books are always middle class. Doesn't matter if they're lower middle class or upper middle class. I don't really understand anything outside of the middle class. I'm like, I will give you any gender you want. I'll give you any culture you want. But outside the middle class, I'm not sure I'm going to do it wrong. So I feel like there's something going on there.
Well, there's a big difference between consciously coming into something and saying, I really want to try to do this, and I want to try to do it right. Blue Delaquanti is out here representing her comic, Oh Human Star. And the number of trans folks I know who, when I told them that she's factory spec female, we have a lot of jokes. They're just like, no, she's trans. She's totally, no, she's not. She just really thinks before before she writes and wants to get the experience right. And so, yeah, there's plenty of roles out there that I wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole because I don't want to screw it up and I want to let the other people voice their experience. But, you know, reach, try something. So.
Tad Williams does that with Otherworld. Am I thinking of the right one? Otherland, thank you. Yeah, I'm sick, sorry. I can picture the covers in my brain because, you know, Tad is a white straight male, but he writes from a character's point of view who is African? Yes. I knew I was going to get it wrong if I didn't look at my husband, so my apologies here. But he does so very well. I have not read it yet. It's on my to-read list, but he keeps telling me how well it's done. So there are authors out there who are pushing those boundaries of yeah, this is what I know, but I'm not limited by my own experience, nor should I be. You know, I should always be pushing those boundaries.
None of us have discovered an alien civilization.
Exactly.
Right.
And yet...
Actually, Tad Williams is a really good example because the Otherland series are kind of cyberpunk fantasy, and this is going to be in my answer to a later question, so I don't want to preempt that too much. But I think cyberpunk is actually a great genre to look to for that blurring of identity boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
and cyberpunk is all about the idea of being dizzied by technology, and so the idea of humanity maybe even overreaching on things. So, and this is definitely an area that we seem to be being hit by right now, where people are just kind of like, I can't keep up. That's okay. You don't have to. Just let it wash over you.
it's about humanity overreaching on gender. Give me all the genders.
Yeah, totally. No, I would love to do gender punk.
Yes.
I need to come up with an idea for that now.
Oh, do you want me to finish my novel? Oh,
Yes.
I can't deal with this kind of pressure.
We've got a whole panel of people telling you.
Winter wrote a fan fiction that fundamentally changed my headcanon about Captain America.
You're welcome.
Forever. So.
Well, to Janine's point too, I think it's important for us to read outside of our experience, and there is a lot of material to read, and I think writing what you know is good, but I find that gets kind of boring, and I don't really like writing what I know. And I recently, like in the last couple of years, heard write what you want to learn, and I really like that. Yeah.
Nice. So, in speaking about gender and expectations and assigned gender, we've been assigning biological sex to, at birth since before we knew what chromosomes were. This is something that just goes back way, way back. So, why do you think we do it? I mean, that's a really deep question to think about, but why does gender matter, and why does sex matter to our species even?
So I think I've been thinking a lot about this lately, and I think that people obviously like buckets. They want to put everything in a bucket, and their preferred buckets are binaries, so that if they know you're not X, you are Y. So people can't even handle the concept of fungus. No, bear with me here. Your first thing you learn is there are plants and there are animals. Yep. And yet, wait, there's fungus, which is kind of got elements of both and kind of neither. So it just blows people's minds. I mean, not to present myself as a fungus, but okay, cool.
I'm right with you.
Yeah, I was going to kind of say the same thing as Winter, that I think part of being human is classifying the world. I'm particularly biased because I'm a librarian. But I think people want to make sense of the world, and one way that we do that is by putting things in categories.
Hey Jill, where am I in the Dewey Decimal System?
I don't know the Dewey Decimal.
The Dewey Decimal System.
I will make up my own taxonomy of gender.
There you go. I think, from a biological standpoint, if you think way, way back in our evolution as humans, you needed to know who you could have as a actual mate. You know, on some level, there is that biological drive of, yes, I can procreate with you. No, I cannot procreate with you. Got it. Okay. So I think to some degree that may have been why there was such a significance placed on that. It was just maybe even, you know, primitive religions and societal structures looked at that as, hey, you know, I can make babies with you.
Yeah, even that is not really a guarantee, right?
Yeah,
you don't know if somebody, like you say, we don't know what someone's chromosomes are.
Exactly.
We'll look at
but
one.
I can give it a shot.
Right.
Yeah.
We'll look at one. Right. I mean, you gotta have a way to extrapolate, I guess.
Yes.
But you look at one physical characteristic, and then you extrapolate everything about this person's anatomy and everything about their role in life, and it's very inadequate. And, you know, like, just look at intersex people, right? Intersex people are about as common in society as Janine with her natural red hair. So it's not a weird outlier. It's a major fact of human existence.
Yeah. One of the things that I use to describe is I say, so, you know, everybody thinks about gender as yin and yang, right? There's the big black thing and the big white thing, but what they don't realize is when you zoom in at it, it was printed grayscale. Once you get down to that edge, there's this really amazing spectrum between the two. And it's there by nature. So we already have a spectrum of gender. You just are trying to pretend for ages and ages that we didn't, because it's much more convenient to only count to 2.
Do you mind comments now, or do you need to wait till questions to end?
We are going to do a Q&A in about 10 minutes-ish.
Oh, wow. Is it that soon?
Yeah, I know, right?
Oh, my God. Can we have 2 hours for this panel?
Check out the other people.
Yeah.
So trying to go into a little bit with fiction and fandom a little bit more, you know, the abolition of gender is often tied up with certain movements that can be exclusive to some groups. So in presenting these examples of non-binary characters, a lot of times they have to rely upon stereotypes and tropes to do it, unfortunately. So can you think of examples in fiction where they accurately depict non-binary characters?
I have
That's
very
hard.
much to say about this, so would somebody like to go first?
I find it difficult to answer the question because I am cisgendered, and I just rely on my trans and non-binary friends to report what they feel is a fair representation of their experience. I will say that I just finished reading a novel called None of the Above about an intersex character. And she's been identified or assigned female at birth, and by external requirements, she fits the typical girl model, so to speak. But she goes through, really questioning her gender identity and what this means and how it impacts her relationships with the people that she cares about and who are close with her. And I thought that the author did a really fantastic job of depicting that.
I actually have one. And I can't believe that none of us are thinking of it right now. Steven Universe. Yes,
If you're wondering what we were all looking at, somebody was holding up a shield.
It is. I've described this to my mom, who's a children's librarian, as this is what would happen if a children's TV show from 20 years in the future fell through a time warp and we got to watch it right now. Steven Universe totally gets it right on, as far as I can, so far on every level. I have not seen them miss a beat with just the fact that, the characters have apparent genders, and that matters. Why exactly? Connie learns to sword fight. Steven has a shield with a princess rose on it. And he's a little schlubby guy who hugs everybody and is all about, no, everybody has to talk to each other. And Connie is like, let's hit things. And then you've got the gems who, they kind of all are female-ish, but that doesn't determine their personalities or their roles or their positions at all. And it's just jaw-dropping to me. It's just absolutely mind-blowing. If you haven't watched it, just, you're excused. We'll take it. Just go get caught up.
Go for it.
Okay. Oh dear, they let me at the mic. Mm-hmm. So I've been doing a lot of reading in preparation for this panel, and when you say you're going to talk about social expectations and spec fic, talking about non-binary cultures and stuff like that, people have all kinds of recommendations, and so I dutifully went and read a number of things, including a reread of the ever fantastic Left Hand of Darkness. Mm-hmm. And what I found was, even in Left Hand of Darkness, in trying to present a society in which there were other options than just male and female, the male and female characters were more exaggeratedly stereotypical. So the narrator in Left Hand of Darkness, who is a human cis guy, he very much thinks in terms of black and white, and it's exaggerated, I think, in order to highlight and differentiate the weird alien culture, and that's its own whole problem, that other genders are presented as a weird alien culture. And another thing I noticed is that these third gender or other gender people are themselves put in a box. So I read a book called Distress by Greg Egan. Mm. And there are 5 genders in that. There's N male, N female, which is what we would think of as cis male and cis female. There are actually it's 7, because there are exaggerated versions of each of male and female, sort of more androgynous versions of each of male and female, and then asex, which is in the middle. And yet, even in a world where 7 genders exist, these 7 genders have their own roles and expectations, and people the narrator looking at a new person pigeonholes them as, oh, that's a you male, and I expect this from that character. So I'm really looking for books that do culture-wide gender non-conforming as in a good way. However, I can give a good recommendation of something that does individual. I find that individual non-binary characters are presented much better. And my favorite is Loki in the comic books. Loki, Agent of Asgard, is gender fluid and awesome. And even Odin, who is definitely the worst parent in the multiverse, gets it. Sorry, go on.
Did you read Ancillary Justice and Lucky?
I had 2 weeks of reading time before this panel.
I tried to read it and I could not. I think my brain broke trying to read it, but she is kind of like the updated. I feel like she's trying to do a similar thing that Ursula Le Guin was doing in Left Hand of Darkness, except that she also uses the gendered pronoun she throughout instead of he.
And actually, as a conscious reaction to our show. One of the things that I realized is, humans have a lot of intellectual frailties. We have potholes we run into again and again. We obey authority. We categorize people. We want to prejudge people because our brains are trying to be efficient. But by becoming aware of that, you can start to go, shit, pothole. And you can try to dig out. I mean, when I read Ancillary Justice, I caught myself going, but is it actually a guy or is that a girl? And then going, yay, I figured out it's a guy. For fuck's sake, Frank. But being made aware of that is one of the things that fiction does for us, is let us go, oh, crap, I don't want to do that. I mean, how many dystopian novels do we have out there where it's like, I'm going to go out and vote now. I don't want that. That's not good. I like votes. Let's not burn them. So...
Interestingly enough, a lot of the examples that we've talked about have been on the sci-fi side of things or the comic side of things. My question would be, why doesn't fantasy explore this more? Because we don't typically see that as much. We see it more in, hey, it's an alien race that doesn't have, a gender identity or has 7. It's not often a fantastical world. So do you feel that, fantasy is lacking in that regard? Do you think maybe it just has more to do with the genre? Thoughts on that?
I have thoughts on this. Yay! No, I really think it's about what people who read fantasy versus science fiction want, right? Science fiction is all about what's the cool new thing, what could we do next, what did I read this week in science, and where does it go? And fantasy is sort of at heart hearkening back to what has been before, or even what's an idealized version of what's been before. But you sort of notice that science fiction books have, if there's a grand sprawling galactic empire, it's probably going to turn into a republic by the end of the book. And if you're in a fantasy book, darn it, those knights are going out and they are making sure you stay in a feudal system. And yay, we love our king, long live the king, or long live the queen, or long live the fairy queen. It doesn't really matter, but that's the push, is let's go back, let's do this. We love it, it's nostalgia. And pushing all of these boundaries is not nostalgia, that's new.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I will actually make a recommendation. Urban fantasy does have some great departures. There's an author named Shannon McGuire who did a series, the October Day series, which is about a female private detective in a noir style.
What?
Who's half fairy.
Nicely divide us into two categories. No, that doesn't work so well. Well, maybe it's about hormonal balance. Let's that explicit again. No, that doesn't work. We keep trying to science gender, and it's
Maybe
not.
it's the number of quarks.
Yeah.
Right.
It's the color of the quarks.
Yeah, and that actually goes back to my point about gender and sex not being so different, and sex not being such an easy binary either, because we keep going to another way of looking at things, and like you say, sciencing
really
gender.
Quote that I can't remember who it's from, but sex is gender in doctor's clothing.
Yes. Yeah, I've heard that one.
Interesting.
I just wanted to share a couple things. There's a lot of webcomics that are exploring gender and transness and non-binary folks. And just to throw out a couple, Blind Springs is a fantasy. Never Satisfied has a trans femme non-binary wizard character. Sister Claire has several trans characters.
Oh,
yeah. And then Neo Cosmos I just started. Apparently nobody is cis, but they haven't actually talked about it a lot.
Interesting.
So I hadn't heard of that last one. What was it?
Neo Cosmos.
I play this game
That one's sci-fi.
where I look around and I just imagine that everybody's trans, and it's very easy. It's like very easy to imagine every single person as trans.
One other thing, though, when y'all have been talking about how gender is assigned and the idea of two genders, I think it's important to recognize that's a very white Western idea of gender. It can be very different in indigenous cultures, and the panel would really benefit from having some people of color on it next time.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And Tumblr, Writing with Color, is a great place to get resources.
Awesome.
for writing
Yeah,
fantasy.
I have a scene in mind where my main character, who's a lesbian, falls in love with a two-spirit person and says, "Have you ever fallen in love with a guy before?" And the two-spirit person says, "You still haven't."
Hello. Hi. So first of all, I wanted to say thank you for mentioning Steven Universe. I think that show also, there's so many things it does well, just breaking down gender roles with Stephen crying and stuff like that. Then you have Stevani, who's like this wonderful creation.
Oh my God,
You know,
yes.
kind of intersex, non-binary, who knows? They're canon pronouns, yes. As well as just like deals with issues of consent and stuff like that, which I think is amazing. But obviously this is less of a sci-fi and fantasy kind of thing because there are less sci-fi and fantasy films being made around non-binary and trans characters. But as an FTM trans guy myself, what do you guys feel about the recent cropping up of movies casting cisgender people as transgender characters and the controversy around that? Because we recently had about Ray, which everyone was really excited about until the director said, "I'm casting a cis girl because this isn't a boy story. This is a story about a girl who thinks she's a boy." Like, Yeah. Sorry to bring that up.
Well,
My feelings on that?
This is a Hollywood thing, really.
Yeah.
They want to see how many things they can sell to how many people, and what's going to sell the most. And unfortunately, the things that we all care about the most are not the things that sell the best. And even when they are, Hollywood still doesn't care. We've been talking about people of color and diversity in movies for years, and nobody was doing it. And then you see all the action movies that are largely starring African American and Latino guys, and oh wow, those get really great reviews at the box office, and they get lots of money coming in. And does that spread out to other movies? Oh no, everybody wants to see a white guy on Mars. Sorry, The Martian kills me. I always imagined Mark Watney was going to be Asian American, and it hurts me passionately in my heart. But yeah, I really feel like that's it. And it's going to drive the rest of us crazy for quite some time until Hollywood catches up.
Yeah, we colorize old movies and we whitewash new ones.
Great soundbite, yeah. I think Netflix are actually doing the best job of this. What with Orange is the New Black and Sense8. I have my problems with Orange is the New Black and the depiction of Sophia, but Laverne Cox is flawless, and so at least there's that.
We had
just have to keep punching.
We had a question about Sense8, but we didn't have time for it. So, yeah,
There's
that's
a whole
definitely
panel
a great
that's-
example. That
Tomorrow morning, Trans Lifeline are doing a panel first thing in the morning. I think it's 10 a.m., and they're going to talk about Sense8.
there you go.
Nice.
Hi, so two things. First, I'll begin the question that's really on my mind. I've been working on a few comics and graphic novels for years, and the only perspectives I'm really good at would be male, female, trans people. Though I have friends who are gender fluid, gender neutral, and all of that, mine is sometimes when it comes to how to fairly represent them, but also to, do it in a way that represents them correctly, but also so I don't royally mess it up and make it into something negative instead without meaning to. So my question is, what are good ways to not mess it up?
Well, I would say, for one, making sure your beta readers, the people you trust to read it, before you do anything serious with it, are very diverse is a really great place to start. Because if you have people reading it who are gender fluid or whatever you're looking for and trying to get it correct, they're going to be able to help you with that. Like, I like to think that I'm pretty knowledgeable on that topic, and even then I still put my foot in my mouth, and Winter goes, no, that's not how you say that, honey. And it's like, oh, oops. So you're going to come across
I say that nicely.
Yeah. You're going to come across that when you have beta readers that are good beta readers.
So I'd like to add on to that. Remember that we're feeling it out ourselves. Like, I am making this up as I go along. And a lot of it is to do with the fact that there is no model for this out there. There is no stereotype of a non-binary person in the media. And I don't know whether I want there to be one, but I feel like just as for every binary trans person, they're blazing their own trail. And I think that every one of us is doing that.
Yeah, I was going to say, a friend of mine, Jenny Boylan, was talking in an interview recently about the fact that up until very recently, transgendered was the preferred term. And now it's transgender, and people will, crawl down your throat about it. And so, be patient, and if you get it wrong, accept that and say, you guys, please educate me. Tell me how I can do better the next time.
Oh, Fran's getting all old school trans on us. Yeah. She's like, wow. I was transing before you even trans.
We've got about 2 minutes left, so I would like to try to get to his question if you don't mind.
Oh, no worries. The second part was just me going, hi, Jared.
Hi, Debbie.
Can I just add on one?
Sure, really quick.
I think also to your question, like, no person is monolithic, and really just think about the arc of your character and focus on that, and don't worry so much about trying to represent all things in one character.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah,
no problem.
So I had two things. First was, since we're throwing out webcomics, I just wanted to mention my favorite, which is Robot Hugs, which the only thing to be described about it is completely about exploring the idea of the other and what the other is, be it in gender or race or in sexuality. And it's a beautiful, beautiful,
awesome,
and very funny exploration. But the thing that I really wanted to ask was we were early on in the discussion. You were talking about how, as humans, we have a tendency to place things in buckets and categorize things really quickly. And I think it was Winder who mentioned one of the things we need to do as humans is grow beyond that immediate categorization.
Like a fungus.
Yes. And I wonder how easy that's going to be. And the reason I wonder is because a few minutes later you started talking about how these issues are explored in science fiction versus fantasy. And there's a really big discussion about what is science fiction and what is fantasy, as if they are two completely different things. Just wondering if you could just speak to that.
Maybe one person, because we are over time.
Maybe two people, because I want to get soundbite in, I guess. But no, this is actually something that we're still all talking about in neuroscience fields, about you really can't break down the human brain's need to put things into boxes. Otherwise, we would be pretty much unable to handle interacting with the world. Interacting with the world is hard enough if you can't make snap judgments based on prior experience. And as your experience grows and as you see more ways that you can interact with the world, that changes what your snap judgment is going to be. And you are welcome to change what your opinion is of anything as time goes on. But it is kind of how human brains work as we know them at the moment that categorization has to happen.
Okay, I'm going to wrap us up there because we are over time. I did want to thank my panelists for being here, and I also wanted to mention that at noon in the autograph area, Janine and I will both be there, and some lucky winner, if they can identify what my necklace comes from, will get another copy out there in the world of Joy to the Worlds, which isn't out until December. So, thank you guys for coming, and yeah, I had to do my little quick pitch, and thank you to my panelists.
Thank you.
Please exit at the rear on the left. Please meet the panelists outside if you'd like to meet them. We are coming over.
Yes, thank you.
Can I have my
Yeah, of course. Yeah,
Thank
sure.
you.
Absolutely.